Fuck this movie! Fuck this movie!
Tony, don't you dare post that.
It's on Twitter. Fuck this movie.
The Monster Hunter movie left me cold. Glacial levels of disappointment. And I knew it was gonna be like that from the start. When it was announced years ago, I was met with some hype because, well, I love Monster Hunter. It's a great game series. But then I saw who was directing the movie. Paul W.S. Anderson, and I immediately lost hope. As well as all of Hollywood, apparently. The best thing I was hoping for is to at least be a stupid movie that could be a lot of fun to rip on with friends or other family members. But unfortunately, they made a movie that I feel is insulting to share with the name of this beloved franchise. Unlike most people, I saw this movie on release night. I was visiting my sister in Fort Worth for Christmas. For my subscribers, this was around the time I came across Wild Riders as well, so things weren't wasted over there. And so the last thing we did while we were staying was to watch the Monster Hunter movie at a drive-in theater. And honestly, I feel like people should experience a drive-in theater at least once in their life. It's pretty cool how they work, and since you're in your car, you can talk as much as you want to during the movie. I mean, I did as well. The good news is that I won't forget the experience because my sister and I had a great time together. But that's also because it was for this movie. My sister was the one who actually paid for the tickets, so thanks. Spoilers for the movie if you care, but please don't watch it. It's not worth your time. Go play the actual game instead. For those unaware, Monster Hunter is a series of games by Capcom, the company responsible for Street Fighter and Resident Evil. It's an action series where you take control of a creatable hunter and hunt distinct monsters. It started back on the PS2 in 2005 and enjoyed a great launch in Japan, not so much in the US, until it enjoyed moderate amounts of success in the portable market, specifically PSP and Nintendo 3DS. I personally started with Monster Hunter Generations. The fifth main entry, Monster Hunter World, was a massive success for Capcom as it became their best-selling game at 16 million units. And now, Monster Hunter is even bigger than it's ever been before. Now, Paul W.S. Anderson is a director that some of you might have heard of. He's responsible for the original Mortal Kombat movies, and has done several other stuff along the way, like Alien vs. Predators, and maybe these other movies. Do you even remember them? The series he's most known for directing is Resident Evil, in which his wife, Milla Jovovich, plays the lead role. Yes, those series of movies are based on the Capcom franchise of the same name. How can you tell? What makes them infamous is that they deviate from the game so much that Jovovich's character, Alice, is the main protagonist of the movie series, and all the other characters from the games that you know and love get pushed to the side to focus on how cool and badass Paul's wife is. They made 6 of these movies, each being worse and more insulting to fans as the last one. And so after finishing Resident Evil, the next franchise he decided to tackle was another Capcom franchise that deviates from the game so much that Jovovich's character, Artemis, is the main protagonist of the movie, and all the other characters from the games that you know and love get pushed to the sides to focus on how cool and badass Paul's wife is. This script writes itself. The movie starts off with this quote which makes no sense for the plot of the movie or the game. It's just a generic quote so they can be like, hey, this focuses on the new world and you see the 5th Fleet's logo. Get hype, bros! I guess it could be a general thing of like the portals of the new world. I don't know, it's just lame and confusing. And so we see the 5th Fleet from World traveling on the dragon ship through I assume is the Great Desert? I know the characters are from World, but this is also referencing a lot of stuff from 4, so let's roll with it. And hey, look, it's the Handler. Why am I excited to see her? Well, at least this one doesn't talk. So already this movie is inaccurate, but that's surprisingly an improvement over the game. You know that scene from the Ember Island Players episode of Avatar, where the play based on them opens, Sokka points to both of him and Katara in excitement, and then they watch the play and hate it? Yeah, that was my experience with this movie, and immediately noticed that when we see the Admiral, played by Ron Perlman, who, number 1, looks nothing like the Admiral, And number 2, has a disgusting wig that doesn't make him come close to how he looks in the game. It's just Ron Perlman in a disgusting wig. We see more familiar faces, but we won't for long when Black Diablos attacks the ship, and a hunter, played by Tony Jaa, gets knocked off the ship. And so we cut to our world, as a truck runs over some product placement. And we are introduced to Artemis, a ranger who doesn't want you to forget that, and her teams are investigating what happened to Bravo Team or whatever. They come across some stones with symbols on them, and then a storm comes and sucks them into the new world. Okay, I'm gonna have to show why calling this world of Monster Hunter a new world makes no sense in the context of this movie. So in the game Monster Hunter World, which this movie itself is kind of based on, you're a hunter of the 5th Fleet who is sent to investigate what they refer to as the New World, which is an unexplored continent of the world of Monster Hunter, separated by a great sea. The older games are referred to as the Old World now. Almost all the games before World take place in the Old World. In the context of the movie, the characters are teleported into the New World, but this is implied that it refers to the Monster Hunter world in its entirety, which makes this reference not only confusing, but also makes no sense. Simply put, it's Columbus syndrome. They get teleported to the New World and then try to figure out where the hell they are. They come across some black glass and start singing an R&B cadence. This is their attempt at character development, but in a bad movie, you just know all these characters are gonna die. They come across a big corpse of a monster. Maybe it's a Darren Moran? I might be wrong, especially since that's an Elder Dragon, which that would be weird to have in the movie. Tony Jaa, or the hunter, sees them in the distance, and he knows they're endangered, and he shoots a shock arrow. And because these are white military people who don't think before shooting, they immediately fired him for doing so. And here we go. Right behind them is a Black Diablos. And we get the funniest shot from T.I. the Rapper looking down a scope with his eyes closed.
Boo! You stink!
And so they start running away. And they start loading every bullet into it. Even a pistol. Like, what is that going to do? And Black Diablos, surprisingly, looks good. But I think that Capcom mostly had to do with this. Some random guy dies, and then they try to get the RPG, and it was too late. Diablos flips the car over and stabs the guy with her horns. By the way, for anyone who doesn't play Monster Hunter, Diablos is male, and a Black Diablos is female. He pulls out grenades and then hits her in the face. They run into a cave, Jaa shoots a blast arrow, but Diablos doesn't care. They somehow break off part of the horn, and she leaves them alone. Now, Diablos wouldn't act like this. She wouldn't intentionally stab a hunter with her horns to kill. Her tips would be round, so it wouldn't be like this. Not to mention, the way she digs into the sand is totally inaccurate as well. Anyways, jump scare! And so a bunch of spiders start chasing the crew. Can someone just explain the editing for this movie, or like, what is with this shot? By the way, Jaa's probably one of the worst hunters I ever seen. Sheath your bow, dude, what the hell? And Jaa runs back to camp while everyone else dies. Anyways, since Artemis is out of commission, she gets taken to the nest. The rest of the Nerscylla just walked over her when they could have easily get in on a snack. I mean, this one had no problem chowing down on this guy. So something that pisses me off about this scene is that this monster is supposed to be Nerscylla from Monster Hunter 4. And yes, it's a spider-like monster, or Tamosaran. And so how do they represent Nerscylla for this Monster Hunter movie? They decide to make it all about body horror. Artemis is put up inside of a cocoon where she escapes from, the black girl rotted away in the cocoon, and T.I. catches up with Artemis.
You're alive.
Just to run into more Nerscylla and die by a nest of spiders putting eggs inside of his flesh and the spiders exploding out of his abdomen while being eaten piece by piece. Now, of course, this isn't Monster Hunter. This would be somewhat acceptable in a Resident Evil movie, since there are bioweapons or creatures that behave like that, and it's a mature franchise. But not in Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter is a franchise that's very lighthearted in nature. You hunt big, intimidating monsters, but that's all wrapped up in a fantasy world that has a heart and soul into it. There's a lot to love about the series for all ages, from the cool-looking monsters to the grind for armor, the friendly cats or palicos that assist you along with your journey, or the beauty and lore of the world. Having a scene like this is a clear disregard to the source material and shows that Paul doesn't actually care who the main audience is. He wants to appeal to the normies of moviegoers and say, yeah, this is what Monster Hunter is all about. Oh yeah, the Narcillas are missing their colors. They aren't all black. Paul? Quick question, Paul. Why do the minorities get the worst and most painful deaths in this movie? Not to mention, we aren't even in the 30-minute mark into this movie. T.I. literally had to live for 30 more seconds to survive the 30-minute mark. Anyways, back to the movie. Oh, you could have done that earlier. Maybe you could have saved T.I. so he would have lived for an extra 30 seconds. However, despite Artemis being in the nest longer than T.I., she still gets out of there without any of this happening to her because, I mean, she had so much will to survive that she was able to reach the surface because the many Narcillas died because of their exposure to the sun. And she stands in the sun in the fetal position. The movie also alludes to this ring that Artemis has. She puts it away before she encounters Black Diablos, but it's never explained like it's from a lost lover or someone from Earth. Paul, is this your ring? Anyway, we should forget about it like the movie did because number one, makes it easier. Number two, it's never brought up ever again in this movie. And so there's a montage of Artemis surviving on her own, and she finds the wrecked 5th Fleet ship. She encounters the Hunter, and they both take out knives and just start fighting. During this fight, she stabs Jaw with her own knife pretty close to the heart, and she makes one of the funniest faces ever. Like, it's a mix of, like, super grumpy and, like, whatever. It's kind of funny. You can thank the over-reliance of slow motion in this scene to give us that face. He takes Milla, Artemis, hostage, which makes no sense because he was trying to take her away from Marcilla. This whole fighting is actually pointless. I mean, he could have just approached her to work together. While they're at the camp, he taunts her while he's drinking clean water, and she hasn't had anything to eat or drink for days by this point. Anyone from the 5th Fleet wouldn't be this heartless. Therefore, again, this isn't Monster Hunter. She escapes, then ties him up, and when she finally gets some water, he kicks his own bucket? Like, dude, what? You couldn't just give her one spoonful of water? You just had to be an asshole hunter? Not to mention there's a break in between where he prays to some gods at a shrine he set up that's clearly important to him, and then Artemis just decides to throw a horn at them and break them. Then they just keep fighting, and fighting, and fighting, and it's all very entertaining. And again, do I have to say it? This isn't Monster Hunter. This is a movie where two assholes practice Darwinism. Them being assholes for each other lasts around 7 minutes when this could have been solved in just 1. Now, I know some of you might be curious if you haven't played the games, just why don't they just talk this out? For once, this is a fine in lore reason. They can't because the hunter speaks in the Monster Hunter language. In the world of Monster Hunter, all the characters speak and write in a different language, and this is represented in the games. Now, Monster Hunter World does have dubbing for multiple languages, but in canon, all the characters speak in the Monster Hunter language. Even in the musical themes, they sing in the language. Now, why did Capcom do this? Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but my guess is easier localization. Like literally, the only line they had to record in English was this.
So tasty!
World was a product for the Western market, hence why that game had a dub. You even have an option in the game to switch the Monster Hunter language. So this can create a dynamic and conflict between the two, but it's done so poorly that I end up hating these characters. Anywho, they run into Narcilla and then Jaw almost falls in, but then Artemis has a bit of heart and then rescues the hunter. Then they both realize, hey, we should stop fighting each other. And they become friends over a Hershey's chocolate bar. No, I am not making this up. A half-eaten Hershey's bar that somehow isn't melted, has God knows what bacteria in it, probably has butt sweat and sand from all the falls, fights, etc. as Artemis has been in. That kind of chocolate bar. That's how they decide to be friends and try to get out together. Now this alone is stupid, but considering what I have to deal with, it's the least offensive thing about this movie. So they start to work together to figure out how to fight Diablos. One of the parts I was okay with was the hunter actually using Narcilla's poison to make a special bow, which is something that could be like in the game, because you can craft, or just buy them, coatings to apply to your arrows that can apply status effect to the monsters. But the hunter just wraps the guts around the arrow and just calls it a day. This doesn't make the movie good, I shouldn't need to point that out. We do get a kind of amusing scene where Artemis is bait, and there's the great sword. At least he's using it kind of properly. But like, Narcilla goes down way too easy. I mean, alright.
Next time, you're bait!
At least the hunter's lore is kind of explained. His family was killed by the Rathalos. And so, they go to the wreck ship, and she gets to the item box, and can try a multitude of weapons. She uses the slinger for a bit, and the weapons are all based on bone weapons from the actual game. She has 14 to choose from, and takes a liking to the dual blades. I should point out that out of the 14 weapon classes that are in the game, only 5 of them are actually in the movie. And some of them are handled so wrong, and which we'll get to when we do. Now they go out to fight the Diablos, and the fight itself, yeah, it's kinda boring. But unfortunately, they still want to make this movie as grotesque as possible. Remember the arrow I previously mentioned? When that arrow is shot into Diablos' eye, I mean, they show the whole thing, and it's gross. They cut back to the eye, and then blood and pus start coming out of its eye, and it's all, yeah. It's like if PETA directed a Monster Hunter movie. And I'll say it before, say it again, I know there's blood in Monster Hunter in the older games, but not like this. This isn't Monster Hunter. You know how there's a lot of comments on the people who can't get into Monster Hunter because they feel bad for beating up on the cool monsters when they start running away limping? Yeah, imagine if Capcom added this kind of disgusting imagery to it. It's not gonna entice that audience, and not even your core audience. I don't get you, Paul. You made a Mortal Kombat movie, a series known for its blood and gore that barely had violence in it, but then you make a Monster Hunter movie years later, a series known for its charming feel, positive outlook on nature, and cool monsters that has unnecessary violence and gore. Artemis uses the RPG against Diablos, and boom, it doesn't work. Jaw gets knocked out trying to mount the Diablos, and ramps a greatsword into its skull. So Artemis uses the slinger to get up on Diablos' head, and then she mounts it and pushes the sword in. And then Diablos is dead. And so like, they try to get out of there and Artemis carves off a piece of Diablos? Oh, is she going to use that to improve her dual blades with a piece of Diablos like you do in the game? Or she's just gonna use it to carry Jaw, and for some reason it implies that this journey of dragging might have taken days or something. But I don't really believe it because of the way it was shot. Maybe it took like a few hours, or maybe they were like in the guiding lands, but I highly doubt it. I still don't understand why after all this fighting and trying to be friendly, he's still pissed off at Artemis. What's with this? And so they get to the area with the ancient forest, see an Absteros, and finally have food.
There's also the Remobra, which is a creature from some of the earlier games.
That's a Cephalos, Paul. Jaw even says so in the movie.
Catcephalus.
And you're qualified to direct a Monster Hunter movie. Why? Oh, by the way, this is supposed to be a potion. You would know this if you played the tie-in Monster Hunter World Iceborne crossover quest, in which Artemis remarks,
It healed me, but I wish it tasted better.
We'll get to this quest later. Then Rathalos starts a stampede. They run into the 5th Fleet, and while the Admiral is using a switch axe, he's swinging it around like it's a goddamn greatsword. I know Capcom was picky about the monsters, but they also should have been more picky about that. And so she runs into the Admiral, who can speak English, and he knocks her out? Why? What is your reasoning? It still makes no sense. What's it going to prove by locking her up and the fleet mocking her while doing so? Bruh, what's the point of this? You literally just undo her shackles like a minute later. Again, the 5th Fleet wouldn't act this stupid or mock someone like this. I would excuse the scene if it was just the handler, but not the serious handler or A-lister. Anyway, she uses the lock to escape the deck, and we are introduced to the worst portrayal of a Monster Hunter character in this movie. Meowscular Chef is in this movie, and they did my boy dirty. He looks so ugly, and his introduction is so awful. You introduce him with a fucking jump scare, and then copy-paste the animations from his cooking cutscenes from game to the movie. It's shot for shot, and it's so lazy. Paul has done this in past Resident Evil movies, and it doesn't make me like the movie at all. It devalues your movie even more because you couldn't come up with any interesting visuals or scenes. Also, Chef isn't this incompetent to leave cat hair on a mug or drink someone else's food. He has way more respect than that. Grand Meowster Chef would be ashamed of him. She didn't train him that way. Anyway, basically the lore is that this thing that brought them over is the Sky Tower. What a great and original name. And that's how people from other worlds crossed over from one world to the other. They are the remnants of an ancient civilization that was more advanced. They destroyed themselves due to the tech being more advanced than them. We have something to do with it. Yada yada yada, who cares? The game's lore and plot wasn't interesting enough, so we had to come up with an even more generic plot about the worlds. Sky Tower is guarded by Rathalos. Who would have thunk it? You can't have a Monster Hunter movie without him, which is fair.
Their only weakness is just before they breathe fire.
Weakness? No, he's weak to dragon, thunder, water, and ice elements. You would actually have a small one-up on Rathalos if you crafted the Black Diablo's dual blades, Artemis, but you didn't do that. This is basically their excuse for a one-shot kills monster. Also, you've probably noticed, but everything is shot so dark and horror-like, which I hate. Monster Hunter's villages, camps, ships, and hubs should be overall inviting places for hunters to prepare for their quest. And the fleet is portrayed in such a mean-spirited way. The soundtrack doesn't help it at all. Speaking of soundtracks, this is one of the most generic soundtracks to a movie ever. The main overture is the only thing that really comes to mind as somewhat memorable because of the use of the electronica. However, I'll say it before, and I'll say it again, this isn't Monster Hunter. The games have a diverse catalog of themes and orchestral tracks that are dynamic and bring way more passion to whatever the hell Paul Haslingler can come up with. Like, take Rathalos' theme. When you listen to the movie track, you think generic electronic music. But when you listen to the game's music, each major monster has distinct themes based on their personality. And don't get me started on my favorites. Okay, you're gonna get me started on my favorites. Here's a snippet of my favorite themes from Monster Hunter games. You see the difference? The movie's tracks feel kinda lost in comparison, where the game's music has distinct overtures for each monster. For once, if you actually remix Rathalos' theme in an interesting way, it would be much better than a forgettable soundtrack. Hell, even in the game's Iceborne quest, you didn't even bother with your own soundtrack. It just uses legacy tracks from the old games. Again, we'll get to you at the end.
I really love how it had almost video game-like music.
Oh, had almost video game music? Oh, does that mean something is devalued when it doesn't sound like it's from a video game? Because that's like 70% of video game music. It is an interesting fact to point out that Masato Koda, the original composer for the very first Monster Hunter game, was actually inspired by the orchestral music that you hear in movies. And that led to the creation of the iconic Monster Hunter main theme, Proof of a Hero. That also led to multiple composers getting a chance to flex their muscles as well, like Yuko Komiyama, who also interestingly did not want to be a part of the series after hearing the music, but then became lead composer of the third game and also made a lot of the most iconic music of the franchise, and my favorites as well. And so, to give a franchise that prides itself on its variation of orchestral themes to just electronic music for a movie that is being released to the masses is pretty insulting if you ask me. Anyways, back to the movie. They head to the Sky Tower. Boo! Okay, Admiral, we know it's raining, but how does your hair go from like fairly okay to just soaked in like 10 seconds? Anyways, they find glass, so that means they fight Rathalos. Guys, just roll 3 times, you'll be fine. Okay, I'm calling bullshit on this. Movie, you're telling me that this dude, who's supposed to be the excitable A-lister, gets knocked out by Rathalos. This dude literally survived an onslaught from Fatalis, whose fire can literally melt entire castle strongholds. Yet this is how he is in the movie. Okay, that one's accurate. And as Rathalos is going to attack, Artemis gets conveniently teleported into the human world by jumping off a cliff. Anyway, the military rescues her, but oh no! Rathalos also went through the portal too, and knocked down their ship. And everyone else in the ship is dead. Except for Artemis, after she just fell down a long height, and is suffering through injuries. It helps to be the director's wife. And you know what? I'll admit it. Rathalos is the best actor in this movie. This entire scene is so dumb, but it's the right kind of dumb. Rathalos' debut on the big screen. The King of the Forest is just taking down trucks and tanks. And I did crack a smile at this part here.
Screw the goddamn army. I hate tanks.
And then the movie goes back to being a Paul W.S. Anderson movie, as Artemis cuts out a wing, takes a flare, and shoots it at Rathalos' mouth.
Got you.
And for once, this is a move I'm actually kind of okay with. Jaw is the one who takes down the Rathalos. If Artemis took him down, that would be such a cop-out. Especially when this kind of shit happened in Resident Evil movies. But Jaw taking it out, since he has more history with Rathalos, kind of makes sense. They just needed to develop it more. And so with Rathalos defeated, they want to act all buddy-buddy like they accomplished something grand. The Admiral comes in, but he's late to help. But then, another portal opens. And at the top of the tower, a new monster appears. It's Gore Magala from Monster Hunter 4. This movie's been crap, but oh baby, after that Rathalos scene, it would be really cool to... I feel really bad for Gore Magala fans. You know, there are probably people who went to see this movie just to see a Gore Magala fight. When you show him in the trailer for a Monster Hunter movie, you imply that you're going to see a fight or hunt with this said monster that was cut there. But no, you just end the movie there. This kind of shit got old with Rhino in Amazing Spider-Man 2, and now you're doing this with Monster Hunter? In the current year?
And then at the very end of the film, we have the Gore Magala, which is a very rare creature from some of the earlier games, and that's a kind of setup for a little sequel, potentially.
China ain't saving you this time, Paul.
What kind of knees are these? Chinese.
I could also point out that Jaw was using an insect glaive without a Kensect, which is like the point of an insect glaive? But really, you're really gonna put Gore Magala behind a paywall for a sequel. Oh, and also there was a post-credits scene in the movie. A dude with a hood watches the fight with Gore Magala that got cut, and then Meowscular shit joins the fight.
It's terrible.
Even the post-credits scene was so shit. You gotta be kidding me. What the fuck?
I wasted $16.
Oh my god.
What really pisses me off is that this movie could have been just entertaining by itself. If you're gonna make a bad movie, the least you can do is make it entertaining. Before it was announced, there was test footage of Gore Magala fighting Rathalos in a mall during Christmas. This sounds super stupid, but it's something that's way more fun than what we got. This movie is so boring, bland, and devalues the brand. Like 70% of this movie takes place in a damn desert. There was no true attempt to capture the world of Monster Hunter. There were no interesting locales, it wasn't accurate to the source material, and was just an overall insulting movie. So apparently, Hall has been wanting to get this license to do the movie when he played the games 10 years ago. The Monster Hunter game started out in 2005, and the most recent one that came out in like 2009 was Freedom Unite.
This has been the longest I've ever worked on a film project, and I'm kind of glad that it took that long because the game has evolved. It's become a worldwide phenomenon.
You're telling me that you've been playing Monster Hunter for 10 years, and this is what you can come up with, Paul? Just copy World's costume design and characters, and then spin your own stupid shit into it? Oh, speaking of costume design...
There's not a lot of information on the internet, so we hired a consultant who's a gamer who's managed to finish this game.
What are you talking about? There's no info on Monster Hunter Online? Bruh, this entire series focuses on online multiplayer, and most of my info came from online. There's tons of information on Monster Hunter Online, as well as talented people who make content for Monster Hunter like guides, history of the past games, the ecology of the monsters, hilarious and helpful animations, and an overall passionate community who, wait for it, loves the game. By the way, for those who don't know, that's like a rarity in the gaming industry. Honestly, I'm a little surprised by the like ratio for these videos. But that's probably because the people who actually watch this to get research and criticize the movie get drowned out by
Sony, are you stupid now?
The visual effects look so bad. But I bet Venom 2's visual effects look great.
Venom 2 movie comes out in June. In June! There was a Venom 2 trailer being released.
Release the Venom 2 trailer challenge.
Venom? Yeah, that's not happening.
But we're not done. We have to look at the Iceborne quest. So, in the expansion for the video game Monster Hunter World, Iceborne, there are 2 Master Rank quests that tie into the movie. In these quests, you actually get to play as Artemis. The first quest has Artemis going through a portal and arriving at the Wildspire Wastes. This is after she has experienced the events in the movie. She sees the Admiral and gives chase. You fight a Black Diablos and then take it down. All of a sudden, when she talks to the Admiral, he can't understand English. They see Rathalos and also give chase. During this time of walking before fighting Rathalos, she starts to put together the pieces. She realizes that she's in the past. So, that means that not only is this thing a piece of shit, this piece of shit is also canon to the games, which makes this all worse. This all ties in together because in the movie, the Admiral mentions that previously there were people who came to the Monster Hunter world through the portals earlier. And this confirms that Artemis came through the portals first in the movie, but also afterwards when she went through the portals that sent her to the past? What? The quest is a sequel, prequel to the movie. And the Admiral knows English because apparently Artemis studied the Monster Hunter language to understand it and translated it to English. And at the end of the quest, she just gives him the notebook she was using. Mind you, she was stuttering through words before talking to him using the book, and the Admiral in the movie can now speak perfect English. You don't want to create a paradox? You created a paradox with my brain trying to figure out how this makes sense! And she tells the Admiral to forget she was here. And then Meowskrilla shows up going,
Dude, what the fuck just happened?
I don't know, some bullshit.
Your rewards for doing this quest is the Artemis armor. And it's fine. It's an okay armor set, but it looks like garbage. It's weak for rare 11 armor, but it's more of a carry set for starting out Iceborne, especially when you get great luck with it, which allows you to obtain better drops. The second quest rewards you with the Artemis layered armor, which if you really like how the armor set looks, you can wear it over any armor in the game. Yeah, I'm not making it. It doesn't look good, and I don't need to wear it over my gear. I was actually wearing different layer armor over this awful looking armor. I hate to end this video on a sour note, so I'm not going to do that. Honestly, after I watched the movie, I went back and bought World for PC for me and a friend for Christmas. And I fell in love with it again. Going through World again was a lot of fun, and then I got to experience the expansion, Iceborne, for the very first time. And Iceborne is legit one of the best DLCs I've ever played. The new areas and monsters are incredible and fun to fight. The flagship monster Velkhana was one of the most memorable experiences I've ever had playing a video game. And I was able to do all the post-game content. It is a really incredible game with an even more incredible community. I know most players have problems first getting into the games, and at first it can be tough. But when you start to learn how the game works, it's an incredible experience. Thinking about it, that's what the movie should have been based on. The Monster Hunter experience. It should have been a coming-of-age story about a hunter learning how the world works, connecting with other hunters, and overcoming the odds together with his friends. You could still do that with Jovovich in the Isekai deal, just don't overshadow everyone else, and don't have some stupid world plot. But this should be the main selling point that should have been showcased. Or even Ja being a better mentor role. That's how I learned Monster Hunter. I had Hyena teach me the game, and now years later, I'm a more competent hunter now that teaches the game to others. With Monster Hunter Rise coming out soon and a new fleet of hunters being introduced to the series, I'm really excited for the future of this series. And I hope this movie will be forgotten about. Because this movie isn't Monster Hunter. This is. Yes! 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 Okay. I got a rare item as well.